Hello, welcome to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, where it is all about helping amazing physicians just like you create a wealthy life free from burnout and with the financial security to practice medicine on your own terms. I'm your host, Dr. Elisa Chiang. Hi, I'm Elisa Chiang, and welcome to the very first podcast episode of the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. Why listen to this podcast? Well, we didn't receive a financial education in high school, college, medical school, residency, or fellowship. We've been left to our own devices to figure out all the money stuff. And as physicians, our financial position is a little different from other professions because we've had such a long training. We go from taking really large loans in school to having a modest salary, but working really long hours during our medical training. And then suddenly we're making a large income, but by then we're quite a bit older than our peers who didn't go through medicine. People in other professions tend to grow their income gradually, and they start making money much earlier than we do. And they don't tend to have quite as much debt. What's more is that we often get the message that we'll make enough money when we're finally finished with our training that we don't really have to worry about money. The truth is, we still need to know how to manage money. We hear about people who win millions in the lottery that go bankrupt. Often these people that were fine managing their money when they had modest incomes, but they just didn't know what to do when they suddenly had a huge change in their financial circumstance. In a way, we're the same. Many of us don't know what to do when we actually have a huge change in our salaries and we first become attendings, and we end up spending maybe a little bit more than we should. So Albert Einstein has been attributed to saying that one of the miracles we have in this world is compound interest. And compound interest really works both ways. It works for debt and for investing. So by not starting to invest for retirement when we're young, like in our early 20s, we end up having to play some catch up. For many of us, it's our late 20s or into our 30s. And for some people, even in their 40s, when they're finally able to actually have enough money to really put substantial amounts down for investing. What's more is that we often have a lot of delayed gratification. So by the time we actually become an attending physician, we're ready to spend the money that we earn, and we're not necessarily thinking about saving and investing for the future. There's a sense of, I've worked so hard and I finally deserve to have nice things. Many physicians, when they first get their first job, go ahead and buy their doctor house. But studies show that over 50% of people leave their first job within the first 3 years. And typically, you don't actually want to buy a house until you know that you're going to be there for the long haul. This is just one of the many financial decisions we make that often hurts us as physicians. So why am I qualified to talk to you about this, and what's my story? Well, I will say that I'm very fortunate that I had parents who taught me at least some good money habits from a young age. I was frugal in college. I never got any credit card debt. I spent a year after college doing research while I was applying for medical school. And because I was working, my parents told me that I needed to open a Roth IRA and put money in there. So I did, not really understanding what I was doing at the time. I went to Caltech for undergrad, which is a very research-heavy institution, and there's a lot of research in the education. I really didn't want to take out the debt from medical school, so I applied for MSTP programs, medical science training programs, which are joint MD, PhD programs that are funded by the NIH. And I was super fortunate to be accepted into 2 such programs. I ended up going to Case Western Reserve University, which is located in Cleveland, Ohio, and that's actually my hometown. I grew up in Beechwood, which is one of the eastern suburbs of Cleveland. Because the program takes on average 8 years to complete, a lot of MSTP students actually buy their own homes. So Cleveland has a relatively low cost of living. And at that time, it was really easy to get a mortgage. So I first moved back into my childhood home, but my father had actually taken a job in California. So my mother was actually in the process of getting the house ready to sell. I got married really young. So originally, my husband and I started looking for some smaller houses in the area that we could actually afford. But then I ended up talking to my parents about buying our family home from them. And we basically worked it out so that we got the largest mortgage we could qualify for. And then they helped us with the down payment so we'd actually buy the house. And this is the process that started my financial education, because I really started reading about mortgages, about what ARMs were, what the LIBOR was, like all these different financial terms. And that got me into reading about personal finance and reading about investing and just really delving more into that whole world. That's also when I realized that the money I had put into that Roth IRA account actually needed to be invested. So I started following the Motley Fool. I started learning about both individual stock investing as well as index fund investing. I read a ton of books like Think and Grow Rich and The Millionaire Next Door. Now, I started making a plan for how much I'd have to save and invest in order to have financial freedom. By the time I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, I was in the graduate school years. And in retrospect, when I was in graduate school, that was the first time I really started to feel some burnout. And that was really from my PI, the principal investigator. He had a tendency to micromanage, and that was something that I really resisted. I remember thinking that I didn't really want to have to spend my life working for someone else, and I need to find a way for my money to work for me so that I didn't have to work all the time. So Robert Kiyosaki was a real proponent of real estate. And what actually ended up happening was that I finished my PhD off cycle. So I had the option of going back to third year med school and giving up a lot of elective time, or just waiting until July and restart the third year medical school when everyone else starts third year medical school. And so I opted for that second option and ended up taking about 8 months off. I was lucky in that my husband was a high school teacher at that time, so his income could actually support us. And what also happened was that I did a seminar from Rich Dad Poor Dad when they came to town. And basically a free evening seminar turned into a weekend that was $300, which turned into a huge sales pitch. And I ended up buying this $18,000 real estate course package. And so because I put this huge amount of money onto my credit card, which was literally like 1 year of my undergraduate tuition, I really had to make it back. And so I was really determined. I started out by trying something called wholesaling. I went to real estate investment clubs in the area and networked like crazy. I ended up signing up for other real estate courses, and one that had a money back guarantee and included mentorship. And that mentorship was really important. So after taking that course, I was able to flip 2 houses, and actually flipping that first house was how I was able to make that $18,000 that I had spent back. Of course, by then I'd also spent other money. So I had to keep going and did that second flip. And I also did some other real estate ventures, partnering with some people. And there were places where I lost money and places where I made money, but I did come out ahead at the time. I did go back to third year medical school, and with each rotation, I thought, well, this is okay, but I really can't spend the rest of my life doing this. And really actually started to get worried until I did my ophthalmology rotation. And I thought I found something that I actually would really like to do. So I did my intern year and 3 years of ophthalmology residency, followed by 2 years of oculoplastics fellowship. And, I really actually enjoyed residency and fellowship. During that time, I tried teaching my co-residents about investing in Roth IRAs. And, I started following the white coat investor, and later on Physician on Fire, Passive Income MD, and the Physician Philosopher. During my medical training, I kind of put the real estate investment aside, but I was still investing through my retirement accounts. Once I finished my medical training, I first tried to go back home to Cleveland, Ohio, but that didn't really end up working out. So my first attending job ended up being in Virginia. I was in the Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Suffolk, Chesapeake area of Virginia. And, I started thinking again about doing the real estate investing, but the real estate market there was so different. I started trying to learning about that. I started learning about syndications, but I wasn't quite a accredited investor at that point. So I had gone into that job thinking that I would buy in and be a partner. And while it was a good job, eventually I realized that I probably wasn't really going to end up being like an equal partner. And it was probably time to be looking at something else. I really thought about going back to Cleveland, where I knew the real estate investing market, as well as had a lot of friends. It really takes a lot to establish yourself in a new community. So I ended up getting a job at one of the big hospital systems in Cleveland. And while I didn't necessarily want to work at a big hospital system, I thought, I would take the job and get established, and then potentially start my own private practice or find another practice to join. I returned to Cleveland in 2019, and it didn't take long working at that big hospital system and taking 24/7 oculoplastics calls to start feeling burnt out. My burnout wasn't necessarily from working really long hours, but it was really more from a lack of autonomy and just lack of voice. My first response to burnout was that I need to figure out how to reach financial independence even sooner than my previous plan. And so that plan I had made when I was a grad student was, within 15 years, but now it's like, okay, how could I do this in like 5 more years? Then in January of 2020, I made the decision that I was just going to go ahead and quit this job, take a 3-week vacation in Antarctica with my parents in December, and then come back from vacation and start my own private practice. And so I was going to spend 2020 figuring out how to actually start my private practice and do it for real in January 2021. But of course, we know what happened in 2020, right? The pandemic came March 2020, and everything was shut down, and there was a ton of uncertainty. And I really started rethinking this, starting a medical practice in this climate. I also attended the first Leverage and Growth Summit that was hosted by Peter Kim. And that's when I first heard about life coaching. I started listening to the Life Coach School podcast and ended up just binging all the episodes. I joined Self-Coaching Scholars that summer. And when certification came up in September 2020, I decided to just go ahead and do it. I mean, I think there was a part of me thinking, well, maybe I would like being a life coach, but there was definitely part of me that was just thinking that I could learn the skills of coaching better, be able to self-coach myself that much better, and really get that much more out of it. My social life at that time had kind of come to a screeching halt because of the pandemic. So I just had more time on my hands. And, I had heard Hala speak on Sunny Smith's Empowering Women Physicians podcast about how when she did the certification program, it wasn't to become a coach. It was just transformative in itself, learning the tools of coaching. So when I did certification, I just found that I love coaching people. During certification, we peer coach each other. And, I just really enjoy the experience of helping people get breakthroughs and have that personal connection, which I didn't always find that I had in my practice of medicine. So in spring of 2021, I launched my business, Wealthy Mindset LLC. And I started to think about who did I want to coach and what would be my niche. I could see burnout facing physicians, and coaching had really helped me with burnout. And so part of me thought about just coaching physicians to help with their burnout. But what I also realized was that I know a lot more about finances, investing than other physicians, and that the wealth that I have accumulated gave me a certain amount of security that other people didn't have, and that finance was kind of my zone of genius. I really believe that, if you have financial security and financial freedom, then you really can practice medicine more on your own terms because you don't have so much reliance on that paycheck. For example, you can cut down hours. You can better negotiate for terms at work. So I started thinking about my own practice of medicine and what would be more ideal for me. I ended up leaving that hospital job and taking a new job at a private practice where I could work part-time. For me, this is, still a work in process. I'm still working on building that ideal life, but with the coaching tools I've learned and with just my knowledge of finance and investing, I really would love to help you build your ideal life. So I hope you'll follow me on my journey and let me help you on your journey to building a wealthy life. And when I say a wealthy life, I don't just mean in money and assets, but also just living a life that's full of the things that you want it to be full of, that is living a life that is consistent with your values, where you're living the full human experience. I also plan to talk about personal finances, investing, and steps you can take in order to get your financial house in order. So I personally, continue to invest in real estate, both with long-term rentals, short-term rentals, and syndications. I also invest in private equity and constantly looking to grow my own education investing. So right now, I'm actually starting to learn about cryptocurrency. So I hope you'll subscribe to this podcast, and I look forward to talking with you again soon. Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and let me know by leaving a review. It really helps to get the word out. And now the disclaimer. I am not a certified financial professional, and this show is really just for your education as well as your entertainment. I'm also a physician, but I'm probably not your physician. So if you need any medical advice, please consult your own physician. Thank you.